The Velthari had watched Earth for 300 years from the darkness between stars. They observed humans building cities and fighting wars. They watched them launch primitive rockets into space and celebrate as if they had achieved something remarkable. The Velthari found it amusing. Humans were children playing with toys, unaware that the adults were watching from the shadows. The Velthari. Dominion controlled 47 planets across the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species and stripped countless worlds of their resources. Their empire stretched across 1,000 light years, built on the bones of civilizations that had dared to resist them. When the Galactic Council voted to harvest Earth's resources, no one raised an objection. Humans were not members of the Council. Humans did not know the Council existed. They were simply another primitive species occupying a planet rich in minerals. Admiral Zirith received the orders on a quiet morning aboard his command ship. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns and had personally overseen the extinction of 4 species. The elimination of humanity was a routine operation, barely worth his attention. He assigned the task to his cleansing fleet and returned to planning more important matters. Earth would be processed and forgotten within a standard cycle. The fleet arrived without warning on a Tuesday in October. 17 massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit, blocking out the stars. Every satellite went dark. Every communication system failed. People around the world looked up at the sky and saw shadows where there should have been light. Some thought it was a solar eclipse. Others believed it was a military exercise. Scientists scrambled to explain the impossible readings on their instruments. No one understood the truth until it was too late. Admiral Zirith gave the order at exactly midnight. Greenwich Mean Time. The Velthari ships released atmospheric purifiers into the air. These were not bombs or missiles. They were clouds of microscopic machines designed to eliminate organic life while leaving infrastructure intact. The machines spread across the planet like an invisible plague, carried by the wind to every corner of every continent in New York. People collapsed on the streets within minutes. In Tokyo, commuters fell silent in crowded subway cars. In London, families died watching television in their homes. In Mumbai, children dropped in schoolyards during morning recess. The purifiers worked with terrible efficiency. There was no pain, no warning, no chance to fight back. People simply stopped breathing and never started again. Within 12 hours, half the human population was dead. Within 48 hours, the number had climbed to 6 billion. By the end of the third day, 7.2 billion human beings had been erased from existence. Daniel Harris was 300 meters beneath the Atlantic Ocean when the attack began. He was the commander of the submarine Relentless, a nuclear vessel on a routine patrol mission. His crew of 200 sailors had been underwater for 3 weeks, completely isolated from the surface world. The first sign of trouble came when all radio contact with Naval Command went silent. Daniel ordered his communications officer to keep trying every frequency, but nothing came back except static and silence. For 6 hours, the Relentless drifted in darkness while Daniel tried to understand what had happened. Then a faint signal broke through the interference. It was a distress call from another submarine, the Valar, stationed 2,000 miles away in the Pacific. The captain's voice was shaking as he described what their periscope had revealed. Cities were dark. Ships were drifting without crews, and strange vessels hung motionless in the sky. Watching over a world that had gone quiet, Daniel brought the Relentless to periscope depth and looked for himself. The coastal city of Norfolk was completely dark. No streetlights, no car headlights, no emergency vehicles. Fires burned in scattered locations, probably from accidents when drivers had died at the wheel. But there were no sirens, no rescue helicopters, no signs of response. The city looked like it had been abandoned for years, not hours. Laura Bennett was standing behind Daniel when he lowered the periscope. She was a civilian engineer, 34 years old. Aboard the Relentless for a training exercise on nuclear propulsion systems, she had been scheduled to return home to Virginia the following week. Her husband and her 7-year-old son were waiting for her in Norfolk. When Daniel turned to face her, he saw the understanding dawn in her eyes. He did not need to say anything. She already knew. The crew gathered in the mess hall to hear Daniel's report. He told them the truth without softening it. Earth had been attacked by an unknown force. The death toll was catastrophic. Based on the silence from every major population center, it was possible that most of humanity had been killed. He did not have answers. He did not have a plan. But he made them a promise. They would survive. They would find other survivors. And they would discover who had done this. Over the following weeks, the Relentless made contact with other survivors. 11 submarines around the world had been deep enough to escape the purifiers. Underground military bunkers in Colorado and Switzerland had sealed their doors before the machines could enter. A research station in Antarctica had been protected by its isolation. A lunar research facility with 47 scientists had watched helplessly as Earth went dark below them. The final count came from a military satellite that had survived the initial attack. 7.2 billion dead. That was not a number Daniel could comprehend. It was too large, too terrible, too absolute. So he focused on smaller numbers. His wife Maria was among the dead. His daughters Sophie and Emma, ages 12 and 9, were among the dead. His parents, his brother, his childhood friends. Everyone he had ever known on land was gone. He read the casualty reports alone in his quarters. He allowed himself 10 minutes to grieve. Then he returned to the bridge and resumed his duties. There would be time for mourning later. Now there was only survival. Laura Bennett did not take 10 minutes. She took 10 seconds. Then she walked to the engineering section and began analyzing the limited data they had collected about the alien ships. She worked for 18 hours straight, stopping only when Daniel ordered her to sleep. When he asked how she was holding together, she looked at him with eyes that had gone flat and cold. She said she would be fine once she figured out how to kill the things that had murdered her son. 18 days after the attack, the Valkyrie began landing mining equipment on the continents. They had already dismissed Earth as a dead world. The remaining humans hiding in bunkers and submarines were too few to matter. Within a generation, they would be gone. The Dominion would harvest Earth's resources and move on to the next target. That was how it had always worked. That was how it would always work. The aliens never detected the submarines hiding in the ocean depths. They never found the bunkers beneath the mountains. They never suspected that 2.3 million humans had survived their cleansing operation. They had killed 7 billion and assumed the job was done. They had made the worst mistake in the history of their empire. In the darkness beneath the Atlantic, Daniel Harris looked at his crew. He saw grief turning to rage. He saw despair transforming into determination. He saw people who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Laura Bennett stood beside him, her hands steady and her eyes burning with cold fire. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity was angry, and the Valkyrie had no idea what was coming for them. The first year was about survival. The submarines could not stay underwater forever. They needed food, fuel, and supplies that could only be found on land. Daniel Harris coordinated with the other surviving vessels to establish safe zones where they could surface without being detected by Valkyrie patrols. The aliens had set up mining operations on 3 continents, but they were not thorough in their surveillance. They believed the planet was dead. They were not looking for survivors. General Kevin Moore had been 2,000 feet underground in Colorado when the attack happened. He was the highest-ranking military officer left alive, and he took command of the scattered human forces by default. His bunker became the central hub of the resistance, connected to other survivors through salvaged communication equipment and encrypted signals that the Valkyrie could not detect. The first priority was counting heads. Across the planet, approximately 2.3 million humans had survived the purge. Most were military personnel in hardened facilities. Some were civilians who had been in the right place at the right time. A group of miners in South Africa had been deep enough underground to escape the purifiers. A tour group in a cave system in Kentucky had emerged to find a world without people. A submarine crew in the Indian Ocean had protected 300 passengers from a cruise ship by taking them underwater when the attack began. Every survivor had a story. Every survivor had lost someone. The grief was overwhelming, but it was also unifying. These scattered groups of humans had one thing in common beyond their survival. They all wanted revenge. Laura Bennett led the first salvage mission 6 months after the attack. The Relentless surfaced near a Veltheri supply convoy that had crashed in the Atlantic after a mechanical failure. The alien crew was dead, killed by the same ocean pressure that would have crushed any human vessel. But their cargo was intact. Laura and a team of engineers spent 3 weeks stripping the wreckage, cataloging every piece of technology they could find. The Veltheri equipment was advanced beyond anything humans had imagined. Their power systems generated more energy than a nuclear reactor while fitting in a space the size of a refrigerator. Their weapons fired concentrated beams of particles that could cut through steel like paper. Their navigation computers contained star charts showing thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Laura studied these systems with obsessive focus, sleeping only a few hours each night. Every piece of knowledge was a weapon. Every discovery brought humanity closer to fighting back, Dr. Samantha. Cole was a physicist from the Colorado bunker who joined the reverse engineering effort. She had lost her husband and 3 children in the attack. She channeled her grief into work, leading a team that decoded Veltheri computer systems and translated their language. Within a year, humanity understood the basics of faster-than-light travel. Within 18 months, they had built a working prototype of a Veltheri shield generator. The aliens had given humanity the tools to destroy them. They just did not know it yet. Daniel Harris became the operational commander of what the survivors called the Ghost Fleet. The submarines had been modified with salvaged Veltheri technology, making them invisible to alien sensors. They struck supply convoys without warning, taking what they needed and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Each raid brought new equipment, new intelligence, and new hope. The Veltheri noticed the missing supplies but attributed the losses to accidents and equipment failures. They had no concept of a resistance. In their experience, species marked for extinction did not fight back. They died quietly and were forgotten. Humanity's refusal to follow this pattern confused and irritated the local commanders. But they did not report their concerns to the Dominion leadership. Admitting that a primitive species was causing problems would be embarrassing, Laura. Bennett developed a hybrid propulsion system that combined human nuclear technology with Veltheri gravity manipulation. The result was an engine that could push a vessel to incredible speeds while remaining completely silent. She installed the first prototype on the Relentless, and Daniel tested it by circling the planet in under 2 hours. The submarine that had once crawled through the ocean depths could now fly through the atmosphere faster than any human aircraft had ever traveled. On the 2nd anniversary of the attack, General Moore called a meeting of all surviving leaders. They gathered in the Colorado bunker, some traveling thousands of miles through enemy-controlled territory to attend. Daniel Harris was there, along with Laura Bennett, Dr. Cole, and commanders from every surviving military unit. The room was crowded with people who had once been strangers and were now bound together by shared loss and common purpose. Moore stood before them and outlined a plan that had been forming in his mind for months. He called it Operation Extinction. The goal was not merely to reclaim Earth. The goal was to take the war to the Veltheri homeworld and ensure that humanity would never face this threat again. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Laura Bennett spoke. She said that she had studied the captured star charts. She knew the location of the Veltheri homeworld, a planet called Veltheri's Prime. It was 17,000 light-years away. It's protected by the largest military fleet in the known galaxy. The population was 8 billion. Daniel understood immediately. 8 billion Veltheri. 7 billion humans. The numbers were almost equal. He looked at Laura and saw the same cold calculation in her eyes. Justice would be measured in equivalent losses. Dr. Cole presented her analysis of Veltheri military capabilities. Their fleet numbered in the thousands. Their weapons were devastating. Their shields could withstand almost any attack, but they had weaknesses. Their commanders were arrogant and predictable. Their soldiers had never faced an enemy who fought with nothing to lose, and their technology, advanced as it was, had been stagnant for centuries. They had stopped innovating because they had never needed to. Humanity had been forced to innovate or die. The survivors had learned to adapt, to improvise, to turn enemy weapons against their creators. They were building something the Velthari had never encountered. A military force driven by grief and rage, armed with stolen technology, and united by a single purpose. The vote was unanimous. Operation Extinction was approved. Construction began immediately. Deep beneath the surface of Kansas, in an abandoned salt mine shielded from Velthari sensors, humanity started building its first interstellar fleet. The project would take years. It would require every resource the survivors could gather. But no one complained about the difficulty or the danger. They had work to do, and the work gave them reason to keep living. Daniel Harris returned to the Relentless with new orders and new purpose. Laura Bennett worked on engine designs during the journey, filling notebook after notebook with calculations and diagrams. When Daniel asked her if she believed they could actually succeed, she did not hesitate. She said they had no choice. She said the Velthari had taken everything from them. She said the only thing left to do was take everything from the Velthari in return. Daniel nodded. He understood perfectly. The ghosts of 7 billion humans were watching. They demanded satisfaction. The salt mine in Kansas stretched for miles beneath the surface. Before the attack, it had been used for storage and underground tours. Now it was the most important construction site in human history. Engineers worked around the clock, cutting chambers into the rock and installing equipment salvaged from Velthari wrecks. The air was thick with dust and the smell of welding, but no one complained. They were building the instruments of their revenge, Captain. Ryan Torres was 31 years old when he was chosen to command the flagship. He had been a naval aviator before the attack, flying jets off aircraft carriers that no longer existed. His family in San Diego was gone. His squadron was gone. Everything he had known was gone. But he had adapted to the new reality faster than most. Learning to pilot the modified submarines, and eventually the experimental spacecraft that Laura Bennett's team was developing, the first ship took 2 years to build. They called it the Reckoning, a name that required no explanation. It was 300 meters long. Combining the armored hull of a submarine with Velthari propulsion systems and human weapons design, the interior was cramped and utilitarian, designed for function rather than comfort. Every square meter served a purpose. There was no room for luxury on a vessel built for war. Laura Bennett supervised the installation of the hybrid engine that would carry the Reckoning across the galaxy. She had refined the design through dozens of prototypes, pushing the technology further than anyone thought possible. The final version could achieve faster-than-light travel while remaining invisible to Velthari sensors. It was her masterpiece, the culmination of 4 years of obsessive work. When she activated the engine for the first test, she felt nothing but grim satisfaction. Her son would have loved to see it. But her son was dead. The only thing left was to make his killers pay. Dr. Samantha Cole made a discovery that changed everything. While studying the interface between human pilots and Velthari navigation systems, she noticed something unexpected. Human neural patterns processed spatial calculations faster than the systems were designed to handle. The difference was small but consistent. Human brains could calculate jump coordinates with greater speed and precision than Velthari brains. The implications were staggering. In ship-to-ship combat, reaction time meant everything. A pilot who could calculate a maneuver half a second faster would always have the advantage. Human pilots, interfacing with Velthari technology, could outperform any alien crew. The Velthari had given humanity the tools to beat them. They had no idea. Torres spent months training with the new interface systems. It felt strange at first, like trying to think in a language he had never learned. But his mind adapted, forming new connections that made the calculations almost instinctive. By the end of his training, he could plot a course through an asteroid field in the time it took to blink. His instructors said he was the best pilot they had ever seen. He said he was just angry enough to focus. Nicole Carter was 28 years old and had been an intelligence analyst before the attack. She had survived by being in the wrong place at the right time, visiting a secure facility in Nevada when the purifiers fell. Now she was the head of human intelligence operations, running a network of hidden listening posts that monitored Velthari communications. Over 3 years, she had built a complete picture of the enemy's dominion. The Velthari controlled 47 worlds across a vast stretch of the galaxy. Their military numbered 12 million soldiers, supported by thousands of warships and countless automated weapons platforms. Their homeworld, Veltheris Prime, was protected by orbital defense stations and a permanent fleet of over 200 vessels. It was the most heavily defended location in known space. But Nicole had also discovered weaknesses. The Velthari were complacent, confident in their superiority after centuries of easy victories. Their communication security was outdated because they had never faced an enemy capable of intercepting their signals. Their commanders followed predictable patterns because they had never needed to be creative. They were an empire built on conquest, and they had forgotten how to fight against someone who fought back. Construction accelerated as more resources became available. Every raid on Velthari supply lines brought new materials and technology. Every month, more survivors emerged from hiding and joined the effort. The resistance on Earth grew bolder, striking mining operations and forcing the aliens to divert forces to garrison duties. By the 5th year, humanity had built 17 warships, each one crewed by survivors who had nothing left to lose. Daniel Harris walked through the reckoning on the day before launch. He inspected every corridor, every weapons station, every sleeping quarter. The crew of 340 watched him pass with quiet respect. They were farmers and teachers and doctors and engineers who had become soldiers. They had trained for years in simulators and modified submarines, preparing for a journey that most of them would not survive. None of them asked to stay behind. Laura Bennett met him in the engine room. She was thinner now, worn down by years of work and grief. But her eyes still burned with the same cold fire that had appeared the day she learned about her son. She told Daniel that the engines were ready. She told him that she had done everything she could. She told him that the rest was up to the people who would fly her, creation into battle. Daniel asked her if she was coming with them. She said she would not miss it for anything. She had spent 5 years building the weapon that would destroy the Velthari. She intended to watch it work. The fleet launched at midnight on the 7th anniversary of the attack. 17 ships rose from hidden facilities around the world, climbing silently through the atmosphere while Velthari patrols looked the other way. Nicole Carter's team had planted false signals to draw the alien sensors toward empty ocean. Giving the fleet a clear path to orbit, Captain Torres stood on the bridge of the reckoning as Earth fell away below them. He thought about his family, his friends, his old life that seemed like a dream from another world. Then he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the mission. There was no room for grief where they were going. There was only room for war. Daniel Harris stood beside him, watching the planet that had been humanity's only home shrink to a blue dot against the blackness of space. Laura Bennett ran final diagnostics from the engineering station, her fingers moving across controls that she knew better than her own heartbeat. The jump coordinates were locked in. The destination was a Velthari military outpost 17 light-years away. The war for survival was about to become a war of conquest. Torres gave the order. The Reckoning's engines roared to life, bending space around the ship. For a moment, the stars stretched into lines of light. Then there was darkness. And then there was nothing but the vast emptiness between stars. Humanity had left. Earth, there would be no turning back. The first battle lasted 11 minutes. The Velthari outpost had no warning, no time to prepare, no chance to fight back. The Reckoning dropped out of faster than light, traveled directly above the station, and opened fire before the alien crew could raise their shields. Captain Torres directed the attack with cold precision, targeting weapons, systems, and communication arrays first. By the time the Velthari realized they were under attack, half their station was already burning. 4,000 aliens died in that first strike. The human fleet suffered no casualties. They salvaged what they could from the wreckage and destroyed the rest, leaving nothing but debris drifting in the void. Then they vanished back into the darkness between stars. Heading for their next target, word spread through the Velthari dominion like a disease. Ships were disappearing. Outposts were going silent. Convoys were being attacked by phantom vessels that appeared without warning and left no survivors. The High Command received dozens of reports but refused to believe them. The humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. These attacks must be the work of pirates or rival factions within the Dominion. The idea that a primitive species had somehow acquired interstellar capability was too absurd to consider, Daniel. Harris led the ground assault on Vareth 7, a Velthari colony world that housed a major military research facility. His team of 200 soldiers landed under cover of darkness, using stealth technology to avoid detection. They fought their way through the facility level by level, capturing scientists and downloading data from alien computers. The information they recovered included detailed specifications for Velthari weapon systems and defense networks. It was worth more than a dozen warships. The campaign continued for 3 years. Humanity struck 19 military installations and dozens of supply convoys. They freed slave populations on 4 worlds, species that the Velthari had conquered and forced to work in their mines and factories. The Korthon, a reptilian race whose population had been reduced by half through Velthari harvesting, pledged their ships to the human cause. The insectoid Myrai, who had been slaves for 3 generations, joined the alliance and provided critical intelligence about Veltharis Prime. Laura Bennett worked constantly, improving the fleet's technology with each new piece of salvaged equipment. She developed weapons that could punch through Velthari shields with a single shot. She designed armor that could withstand attacks that would have destroyed any human vessel built before the war. Every innovation gave the fleet another advantage, another edge that the enemy could not match. Nicole Carter ran the intelligence network that kept the fleet one step ahead of their pursuers. She intercepted Velthari communications, decoded their orders, and predicted their movements with uncanny accuracy. When the Dominion finally admitted that the humans were responsible for the attacks, she was the first to learn about the response they were planning. Admiral Zyrith, the same commander who had ordered Earth's destruction, was personally assigned to eliminate the human threat. He assembled a fleet of 200 warships, the largest military force deployed by the Dominion in 50 years. His orders were simple: find the humans, destroy them, leave nothing alive. The confrontation came at a location Nicole had designated Nexus Point, crossroads of trade routes near the edge of Velthari space. Torres positioned the human fleet within an asteroid field, using the massive rocks as cover. When Zyreth's ships arrived, they found only false signals and phantom readings. The Velthari admiral was arrogant. He had never lost a battle in his long career. He ordered his fleet to pursue the signals into the asteroid field, confident that his superior numbers would overwhelm any ambush. It was exactly what Torres had predicted. The humans struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Their ships appeared from behind asteroids, firing before the Velthari could react. Human pilots, their calculations faster than anything the aliens had encountered, danced through the chaos while Velthari vessels collided with rocks in each other. The battle became a slaughter. Daniel Harris commanded the ground teams that boarded damaged Velthari ships, capturing officers and securing navigation data. Laura Bennett coordinated repairs from the Reckoning's engineering bay, keeping damaged vessels in the fight through sheer force of will. Nicole Carter fed false signals to the Velthari sensors, making them see enemies where there were none and miss threats that were. Right in front of them, 163 Velthari ships were destroyed in 6 hours. 12 human vessels were lost, including 3 that deliberately rammed enemy flagships when their weapons failed. Those crews chose death over retreat. They made their final moments count. Admiral Zyrith escaped with 37 ships. He fled toward Veltharis Prime with the remnants of his once mighty fleet, sending frantic warnings to the Dominion High Command. The humans were coming. Nothing he had done could stop them. The Empire needed to prepare for an attack on the homeworld itself. The victory at Nexus Point changed everything. Other species that had suffered under Velthari rule saw that the conquerors could be beaten. More ships joined the human alliance. More intelligence flowed into Nicole's network. The path to Veltharis Prime became clearer with each passing day. Captain Torres called a meeting of the fleet commanders after the battle. They gathered in the Reckoning's conference room, their faces marked by exhaustion and grief and something that might have been hope. 12 human ships remained operational. 18 Korthon cruisers had joined their cause. 31 Myrai fighters stood ready for the final assault. Torres spread a holographic map across the table, showing the Velthera system and its defenses. 90 warships remained in orbit around the homeworld. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons capable of destroying anything that approached. The planetary shield could withstand bombardment for weeks. It was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Daniel Harris studied the map and saw only targets. He thought about his wife and daughters. He thought about the 7 billion humans who had died without knowing why. He thought about Laura's son, who had been 7 years old when the purifiers took him. Every death demanded an answer. Every loss required a response. He looked at Torres and nodded. They both knew what had to be done. The fleet set course for Veltheris Prime. Behind them, the wreckage of Xyrith's Armada dry. Fitted through the asteroid field, a monument to Veltheri arrogance. Ahead lay the final battle, the confrontation that would determine the fate of two species. Laura. Bennett watched the stars streak past the observation window. She had not slept in 3 days. She had not eaten in 2, but her mind was clear, focused on a single point of light that was growing brighter with each passing hour. That light was Veltheris, the home of the creatures who had killed her family. She intended to make them understand what they had done. The combined fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Veltheris, a system on the 7th anniversary of Earth's purge. 24 human vessels, 18 Korthon cruisers, and 31 Myrai fighters hung motionless against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. Before them lay the heart of the empire that had murdered 7 billion people. Veltheris Prime was a beautiful world. Blue oceans, green continents, swirling white clouds that reminded the human crews of the home they had lost. 8 billion Veltheri lived on that planet, going about their daily lives without any awareness of what was coming for them. They had celebrated the harvest of Earth as a minor victory, barely worth mentioning in their news broadcasts. Now, the consequences of that indifference were arriving in the form of warships and weapons and rage. The Veltheri Empress addressed the invaders through an open communication channel. Her voice was calm and measured, filled with the confidence of someone who had never faced a genuine threat. She offered negotiations. She offered territory. She offered reparations for an unfortunate incident at Earth. She spoke as if humanity was a minor annoyance that could be satisfied. With trinkets and apologies, Captain Torres responded by broadcasting a single image across every frequency the Veltheri used. It showed Earth from orbit, its cities dark and lifeless, its population reduced to scattered survivors hiding in bunkers and submarines. He let the image speak for itself. Then he cut the transmission and ordered the fleet to advance. The battle for Veltheris Prime began with the destruction of the outer defense stations. The Myrai fighters swarmed the platforms, drawing fire while the heavier ships moved into position. Korthon cruisers targeted the communication relays, cutting off the planet from the rest of the Dominion. Human vessels engaged the 90 warships guarding the homeworld. Their superior reflexes and tactics, overwhelming defenders who had never faced an enemy this determined. Daniel Harris led the ground, assault on the planetary shield generators. 300 soldiers dropped through the atmosphere in armored pods, landing in the mountains north of the capital city. The Veltheri defenders outnumbered them 10-1, but they fought with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. Every soldier in that assault team had lost family in the purge. Every trigger pull was an act of remembrance. The generators fell one by one. Laura Bennett coordinated from the reckoning, analyzing the shield network and identifying weak points for the ground teams to exploit. She worked for 40 hours straight, surviving on stimulants and determination. When the final generator went offline and the planetary shield collapsed, she allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. Then she returned to work because there was still more to be done. Dr. Samantha Cole led the electronic warfare effort, crashing Veltheri defense networks and turning their automated weapons against each other. Years of studying their systems had given her intimate knowledge of their vulnerabilities. She exploited every flaw, every shortcut, every arrogant assumption they had made about their own superiority. The empire that had conquered dozens of species discovered that it could not protect itself from a handful of angry survivors. The battle lasted 6 days. 90 Veltheri warships were reduced to 40, then 20, then than none. The orbital platforms burned and fell. The capital city surrendered after human troops reached its outer districts. Admiral Zirith, who had fled from Nexus Point to warn his people, was captured, trying to escape on a private vessel. His crew handed him over without resistance. On the seventh day, Captain Torres stood on the bridge of the reckoning as the Velthiri Empress transmitted her unconditional surrender. Around him, his exhausted crew waited in silence. They had won. They had done what everyone said was impossible. They had brought the mightiest empire in the galaxy to its knees. But the victory felt hollow. 7 billion humans were still dead. No amount of Velthiri blood could bring them back. No revenge could fill the emptiness left by lost families and shattered lives. Torres looked at the beautiful planet below him and felt nothing but weariness. Daniel Harris joined him on the bridge. He had come directly from the surface, still wearing armor stained with dust and blood. Behind him came Laura Bennett, who had not slept since the battle began. They stood together, 3 survivors of a dead world, and faced the decision that would define humanity forever. The fleet had the power to destroy Veltheris Prime. They could deploy the same purifiers that had killed Earth's population. They could give the Velthiri exactly what they had given humanity. 8 billion deaths for 7 billion deaths. Perfect symmetry. Perfect justice. Torres thought about it. He thought about his family in San Diego, about the squadron he had flown with, about everyone he had ever loved who was now gone. He thought about the emptiness that would remain even if he killed every Velthiri on the planet below. He made his decision. The Velthiri military was completely dismantled. Their fleet was destroyed, their weapons confiscated, their soldiers disarmed. The Empress and Admiral Zirith were tried by a tribunal representing every species the Velthiri had wronged. They were found guilty of crimes against sentient life and executed in public view. The other Velthiri leaders faced similar justice, their fates determined by the severity of their crimes. The population of Veltheris Prime was confined to their homeworld. They were stripped of faster-than-light capability for 100 years. 1 year for every 100 million humans killed. They would rebuild their society under the supervision of the alliance they had once conquered. They would learn what it meant to be powerless. Humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The Galactic Council that had authorized Earth's harvesting was dissolved and reformed with human oversight. No species would face extinction at the hands of another, while humanity had the power to prevent it. That was the promise Torres made on behalf of his people. General Kevin Moore had remained on Earth, coordinating the final liberation of the planet as the last Velthiri mining operations were destroyed. When the fleet returned, he greeted them as heroes. But Torres rejected the title. He said they were not heroes. They were survivors. They had done what was necessary to ensure that humanity would never be victims again. Daniel Harris walked through the ruins of his hometown in Connecticut 6 months after the war ended. The buildings were being rebuilt by survivors who had emerged from hiding. Children played in streets that had been silent for 8 years. Life was returning to a world that had been left for dead. Laura Bennett found him there, standing where his house had once been. She did not speak. She did not need to. They had both lost everything and had found purpose in their loss. Now that purpose was fulfilled, and they had to figure out what came next. In the years that followed, monuments were built on every continent. Simple stone pillars bearing the names of the 7 billion dead. At the base of each monument, the same words were carved into the rock: we remember. We survived. We will never forget, and across the galaxy, every species learned what the Velthiri had discovered too late. Humanity, when pushed to the brink of extinction, would not go quietly. Humanity would fight back with everything it had. And humanity would win. The universe would never make that mistake again.